morning and welcome back to Thinking Matters. This morning we're filming in a slightly different location in my house. This is where I typically sit to have my quiet time, and actually over my shoulder to my right there is where my wife typically sits. And when she's often reading in the Old Testament, I might be in the New Testament or somewhere else, but when she's done, many mornings she'll say to me, you know, God hates pride. And I think that we need to keep that in mind as we live in this day of Corona. I will tell you that I talk to many people throughout the week, many times around healthcare, because that's what I do. And they're all waiting for science to solve this problem, for science to come forward with a vaccine or some other solution that'll make life more like what we wanted it before. And I think it's a wonderful thing, and I think it's likely that science may come to that. But I think we as Christians have to understand that what we need to be thinking is that, and praying, is that God would allow science to do that, because it's God in whom we have to look to. Even if we have talents, we look to God that those talents would be in keeping with what He would allow and He would want. If not, we become very prideful. She was reading just this morning in Ezekiel, and let me read to you what it says there. This is the sovereign Lord says, "In the pride of your heart, you say, I am God. I sit on the throne of a God in the heart of the seas. But you are a man and not a God, though you think you are as wise as a God." That's just one example of God interacting with us, telling us, you know, you really don't know. You could go to Job and look at that. You could see the Tower of Babel. I mean, the stories are on and on about God needing to be included. We need to recognize that when we do something, it's because God has allowed us to do that. I was also myself this morning in the Puritan prayer book that I often talk about, and there was one in the prayer there talking about being able to see ourselves. I'm just going to read you one short line. "My faculties have been a weapon of revolt against thee. I have, as a rebel, I have misused my strength and served the foul adversary of thy kingdom." So when we use our talents and our abilities in a fashion that's not including and inclusive of God allowing us, then we become a tool of the enemy. Remember our three enemies, our flesh, the world, and the devil. We play into that hand in the kingdom. And that's what our culture is doing. We deny the existence of God, and then we wonder why there's riots on the streets and lives are not recognized as being valuable, that people are not humble, that people are not repentant, but people are arrogant and proud and self-sufficient. I've said many times that our prayer life reflects our dependency upon God. When we include God into the things that we're doing, whether it's making a vaccine and solving a problem or just dealing with a difficult child or a difficult situation, do we include God into that? If not, then we're going to be on our own, and we're going to be using our faculties in a fashion that would be revolting and a rebellion against who God is. So today I'm going to now take you, shifts gears a little bit. We're going to go to where we've been in Titus. Last week we were talking about Titus and the importance of knowledge, and that how we want our knowledge not to be things like trivia, but we want it to be something that changes us, that moves us towards godliness. So our knowledge of God becomes very important in how we live, how we think, how we deal with coronavirus. And so I'm going to pick up today in just the second verse. It says, "A faith and knowledge resting on the hope of eternal life, which God, who does not lie, promised before the beginning of time." A bunch of things to talk about in there. One is the interesting concept of time. You know, time is something that we measure as created beings. God is outside of time, and to Him, time has no meaning. But to us, it has a meaning because each of us had a beginning, as did the entire created world. There was a time when matter came into existence, and then it began to move. Let's just say in an explosion way, it would have moved apart. Science has shown that the universe had a beginning, so it came into existence. Thus, the measurement of time came to be. God was outside of that. And so in the beginning, He was outside that before time, but He comes into that, the eternal God, as the concept is, the hope of eternal life. I think it's very interesting to think about what eternal life is. If we go to the book of John chapter 17, Jesus is praying here. This is towards the end of His ministry. And He says, "Father, the time has come. Glorify your Son, that your Son may glorify you. For you granted him authority over all people, that you might give eternal life to those who you have given him. Now pay attention to this. He says, now this is eternal life, that they may know you, the only true God, and Jesus, whom you have sent. So to have eternal life, we have to have a complete understanding of who God is. That would also change the understanding of who I am in the context of who God is. And then we have to have an understanding of the Son. Otherwise, we can't have eternal life. In 1 John 5, it says, he who has the Son has life. He who does not have the Son does not have life. So an understanding of who Jesus is, who I am as a sinful person, who God is, all these things come into being. And Jesus was bringing that forward, that when we understand that, then we have communion and we have eternal life. Now, everyone at some point will come to understand that. In Philippians, it says that in the end, every knee shall bow. So when we come face to face with God, when there's no difficulty in seeing it, there's no illusions, everything is stripped away, and there we are standing face to face with God, every knee will bow. What we would hope is that people would come to that knowledge now and not when it's too late. And that's what Paul is talking about in Titus, that we have that knowledge that's set on that hope of eternal life from the God who was there from the very beginning and going forward. Each of us has a day when we get up in the morning, and we have a day to live. And I would suggest that we start our day with being with God and searching for who he is and who I am because of who he is. He's not who he is because of who I am. I am because of him. And so understanding who he is, that I might better understand myself and then better understand my day, whether I'm a researcher for a vaccine or whether I'm just a stay-at-home mom or just a guy going to work every day. We need to understand all of those things in the context of who God is. And then we need to live our lives in that fashion. And in the midst of that, we need to be humble. Humble that we would include God, that we would say that this is about him. It's not about me. It's about what he's doing. He created us. He created all things. He has a plan. There is a direction. This gives meaning and purpose to our life, even when life is difficult. Let's just say we're in a prisoner of war camp and we don't ever get to go anywhere at all. There's still a way in which we need to live that life in the context of who God is. And we may be in that camp because of bad things that have happened to us or bad things that we have done. That's not the point. The point is, as we go forward, how do we live that forward in the context of a God who is, who was, and who always will be? Have a good day.